Happy Friday! I'm very excited about today. I have literally just finished recording the most amazing conversation with our guest today, Sabiha Vorajee. So Sabiha was actually introduced to me by somebody that I was participating in a mastermind with a few months ago, and they introduced me and said, you've got to talk to Sabiha, you've got to have her on your podcast. She does these amazing things with leadership and the gender pay gap. And so initially I was a bit like, gender pay gap doesn't really float the boat of the poddies. But, and I have to say this, but there are occasions that I'm wrong, and this is one of those occasions that I am wrong. I kind of felt like when we were starting the conversation, we were going to go down the kind of gender pay gap route and what that actually means for business owners and revenue. In a way, I want to be clear that does not exclude you guys, because I make some points during the episode about how I do feel sorry for you guys at the moment. The world is a difficult place for both men and women right now. But I thought that was the direction it was going. And then we had this incredible conversation, not just about revenue and about, what we're actually impacting or how we're actually impacting our revenue in terms of the way that we show up as a leader or the way that we present ourselves to the world, but a really interesting conversation with tons of layers around showing up as your best self and what that actually means for your strategy, and expectations that are defined by society and how that impacts your business and the way that you're selling, and how it impacts the way that you show up, how you be visible, how you be vulnerable, how you sell, how you promote. And it was so interesting. And I think that, it's one that you need to give a good listen. It's a 40-minute episode, so it's slightly longer than normal, but it's such an interesting conversation. And there really are so many golden nuggets that are being taken away from it. So make sure you have a listen to this one, grab a pen, grab a quiet space, and really dig in. Whether you are male or female, this is something that is layered, that is interesting, and that really will show up a few things about how you feel about your business, about how you feel about the expectations that perhaps the world are setting upon you, and what that is impacting in terms of your ability to generate revenue, in terms of your ability to promote yourself, to be visible and vulnerable in your business. As you can tell, it's something that I am super passionate about. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm really excited to hear what you guys think. So enjoy and let me know how you get on. Okay, poddies, I am excited because, as mentioned, we're going to be talking about something that is a little unusual for us, a little deep this week, which I'm very excited about. As you may remember, I was fortunate enough to be asked to be on the news last year talking about the gender pay gap. And over the last year on the podcast, we've been talking about why we do or do not, in some cases, want more income and want to generate more revenue in our businesses. So today I'm being joined by Sabiha on the podcast, who is an absolute expert in this field. And she's going to be sharing some of her insights into why, women specifically find it difficult to rise through the corporate ranks, to think about their own worth when it comes to revenue that they're generating or income that's being produced elsewhere. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited.
Thank you for having me, Jessica. It's great to be here.
So how did you fall into this? Because I always say this to people, I'm like, everybody falls into a career. I don't know that many people who've actually been like, right, no, since I was 2 years old, I've wanted to be a doctor. But, especially with things like leadership or gender pay gap or controversial issues, it usually takes some kind of like transformation or some experience to get into that world. So what was yours?
So I grew up in an Indian background, which was incredibly patriarchal. And, from a very young age, I pretty much heard that, women were considered inferior to men. And being the incredibly non-subservient person that I am, it just really galled on me. So I think that was always the background for me. Was I always like, I'm just as smart as the boys. Why on earth would I be considered less? So that was kind of a running through my life. And then when I started my career in HR, I moved into the reward and remuneration space across an international spectrum. And especially when I was in Australia, the gender pay gap was kind of kicking off probably a good 10, 15 years ago. And a lot of my work, because I was so fascinated and interested and passionate about gender equality, for me, in my space, it was like I got to look at the data, I got to look at the practices in the organizations I was working in, and I started having conversations with managers, senior leaders, even at the C-suite level, around why is it that we have these pay gaps? You know, what are our processes? What are the conversations that we're having that's actually compounding this issue? And then I also started, because I'd be in interviews and I'd be, you know, at all levels, I started noticing patterns with the way men articulated their value and what they asked for and the way women did it. And I was fascinated to think, oh my God, there's a real marked difference. And obviously it's my experience over the last 20 years. And so that was where kind of my coaching really began, because I thought, okay, so there's a lot of things happening here where I need to bring it kind of out there and let people know about it. But my experience in reward and remuneration means that I can bust a lot of the myth that I hear from women to say, well, I can't ask for this because we've got a policy, or I can't ask for this. And I'm like, I work in reward. I've been the head of reward for numerous organizations for years. I can tell you that's not the case. You know what? Men will ask, and they will ask irrespective of the rules in place, but women don't. And so that all kind of came together, I guess, it, you know, kind of coagulated into a space where I thought, okay, I need to be in this space because A, I can bust the myth, but I can also help with my coaching background to support men and women to really start getting rid of this gender pay gap, because it doesn't serve anyone at any level.
So it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I know that a lot of my listeners have their own businesses and have left corporate work because they've experienced certain issues in the corporate world, whether they like it, didn't like it. And the gender pay gap is one of those things that's been pretty prolific over the last year or so when all of these discoveries have been coming out. And I know that it was certainly something that I experienced in the sales world, and you know, I'm quite bolshy as a person. So for me, you know, working in a male dominated environment actually, I think, set me in really good stead, because I wasn't afraid to ask for my value. I wasn't afraid to stand up and say, no, actually, I want to be paid. And you know, we were always, despite what the companies would say, we were always comparing, what are you getting paid? What was your bonus? What was this, that, and the other? And I think that set me in really good stead. Interestingly, when I went into running my own business, I still had that mentality. I wasn't afraid to charge good prices. But over time, what I noticed was that I held back in a way that some of my male friends who were also setting up businesses, or who went on to set up businesses, I would hold back from visibility or promotion, or, you know, really giving my business the credit that it deserved. And I see that a lot with women who start running their own businesses, who either go into consultancy or coaching or, you know, web design, graphic design, VA. Is that a common thing? Are we, you know, when we're looking at obviously the bigger concept of the gender pay gap, are we also looking at how people feel, you know, and how they perceive their value in relation to not only the income specifically, but also other activities?
Absolutely. And it's interesting because I think the one piece of research that really when it came out, I was absolutely fascinated by was around the perception of women when we do put ourselves forward. So there is a lot of research out there that actually shows that when women behave in an assertive manner, they are seen as aggressive and can effectively lose points in the likability factor. Whereas if a guy behaves in that way, he's seen to be, you know, assertive and he's going after what he wants. But women actually do get perceived negatively and can face consequences, because at an unconscious level, there is clearly still a level of behavior that is appropriate for women and is appropriate for men. So that was really fascinating insight in terms of research, because I've definitely noticed in the corporate world, and also when I've worked with women who are running their own businesses, and they say exactly what you said, which is, I'm not comfortable putting myself out there because I feel like I'm bragging or whatever. And I said, if you were a guy, would you feel that way? And they're like, probably not. And I said, so effectively we're having this conversation that as a female, you feel like you shouldn't be putting yourself out there and you shouldn't be talking about how great you are or what a fantastic service you offer. And they were like, yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And I was like, and that's some of the things that I unpick. So one of the things that I find fascinating is when I coach, and I often get women saying, just tell me what I need to do and I'll go and do it. And I'm like, happy, fine, that's great. You know, do it. And then we have the conversation, and I can sometimes, you know, give you a 10-step plan around these are things that you need to do. And then, you know, 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, I'll say, how did you go? Oh, I haven't asked yet. Oh, okay. So is that, you know, you told me that you didn't have any issues about asking. You know what to do now, and you haven't asked. And, you know, it's kind of that lull in that conversation where you start to realize that within ourselves, we sometimes hold beliefs that actually hold us back from doing it, because we might think we're ready to go ahead and do it. But if we know what to do and we're still not doing it, and I fall into this trap myself, for me, then it's like, okay, I need to go a lot deeper to figure out what is stopping me. And there's a lot of internal things that obviously go on, but there's a lot of external factors as well that play into our model of the world and how we approach the things that we approach.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, we have lots of men that also listen to the podcast, and it's one of those things, isn't it? I do feel a bit sorry for men in the current environment. I have to say, if you are a white middle class male and, you know, basically people dislike you intensely at the moment, like, and I think that is something we have to be quite honest about. And I know that it's something that I find really challenging, because I look at some of my friends and I think, oh my goodness, these are great people. You know, these are amazing people. They really care about people, and yet they're getting such a bad rap. And, you know, I think it's one of those things that actually makes it more challenging sometimes for men to be allies in those situations. You know, and I'm really fortunate. I work with both men and women, and have done, you know, over the last few years. And admittedly, I work with way more women than I do men, because women do tend to find sales more of a struggle from a mindset perspective. Like you say, they know what they should be doing, but they find it more challenging to go out and actually do those things because of the confidence around it, because the way they feel about it and the way that it makes them feel about themselves. Whereas men, I find, are brilliant in that they are goal oriented. So you give them a goal and they're like, right, okay, tell me what to do to go make that happen. And it's almost like they put the blinkers on and they get really head down and they're really, really focused on hitting that goal. Do you think that that's a contributing factor? You know, do you think that it's this ability to compartmentalize? Perhaps men don't take on the need to be liked as much as women have been kind of taught to in society.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I totally agree with you, because you only have to look at the way women leaders get treated to see that women who are coming into leadership positions, their biggest concern is, you know, I'm going to lose friendships, people aren't going to like me as much. I'm actually a caring, empathetic human being, and that's the kind of leadership I want to bring. But I'm effectively being told that I'm being seen as a wimp, that I'm more concerned about this. So the perception of women in leadership, I mean, you have to look at the way female politicians get treated. It's absolutely abysmal. And there is a level, I think, of backlash to women, because I think there's almost, especially in this climate, politically as well and economically, it's almost like we're operating on a zero-sum world kind of model, because it's almost like, well, in order to give to women, we're going to have to take from men. And I absolutely don't buy into that. I think there's more than enough to go round. But when women go after what they want, I think they are perceived negatively, and they do often face a backlash. And I know some women have said to me, my concern is that I'm going to have to deal with that kind of stuff. So not only do I have to deal with the fact that I'm going after what I want, I'm going to have to deal with the fact that of the emotional backlash I'm going to get, which I predominantly have worked in male-dominated industries as well. And when I have those conversations with male leaders, oftentimes they've said to me, really honestly, I had no idea that this is what women face. So not only do we face the barrier of asking for what we want, then we potentially experience a negative backlash. And so, you know, any human being, if they experience anything negative that hurts them, is going to take a step back and probably think twice about doing that again. Whereas I've coached men as well, whereas it's very rare that they get that response. So it's almost a two-prong approach, that not only are we, you know, educating women about asking for what they want, but they're also having to deal with the consequences of asking for what they want. And so until we get to a point where within organizations and the way we operate, you know, infrastructure and structure actually supports women in that way, I think we still have a really uphill struggle. And my primary concern and focus when I work with corporates is to predominantly work with the male leadership, because they usually are the ones in the leadership positions, to help them understand how they're approaching the conversations. You know, what is it that is their decision-making process, and how often does unconscious bias occur there? And then when you work with women, like so for women who are going out and they've got their own businesses, it's interesting to say, So the likelihood is you are probably going to face a backlash, or you are going to experience a level of emotional disturbance around asking for this. But how important is it for you as an individual and for your business to kind of keep on this journey? Because I think at the end of the day, it's going to take women consistently and continuously stepping into this really uncomfortable space, facing backlash, to just keep going. We almost have to kind of be so persistent. And I know growing up, we laugh about it now, but I used to just get called all sorts of things because I refused to acknowledge that I ever considered myself inferior in any way. There were so many comments about, well, no, you can't do that because you're a girl, or you can't. And I was like, no, I don't buy that. But it was really hard because I was going against my culture and my community and my society. And that was tough. But in the end, for me, being who I wanted to be was far more important than what other people thought of me. So there is still, I think for women, there's all of that we have to contend with, as well as knowing what to do and how to ask.
And that's so hard, isn't it? Because I think, again, one of the things that I see when people are building their businesses is that we know what we want, we're afraid to ask for it, and that manifests itself in my industry in the sale. People know that they want people to buy from them, they know that they can help them, they know that they can serve them, but it's actually really, really difficult for them to ask for that sale. And I think that it does come down to that piece around rejection, and I think that we all experience rejection differently, and in some ways, again, for all the men listening to this, I pity you guys, right? Men, right from the get-go, as teenagers, they have to ask girls out. And I have no idea how you do it. I've never been able to ask anybody out in my life. It just terrifies me. Which says a lot, right? I'll take all the sales rejection you've got, but if you're in a bar and I would have to approach you, I don't know what I would do. And it is that kind of thing, isn't it? Because, we do put that role on men from quite an early age to be put in the firing line, if you like, for rejection. They are asked to ask women out. We watch films where it's men who are constantly having to, go out and put themselves out there. And women take more of a back seat in rejection in earlier life, I find. Or it's seen in different ways. It's more subtle, or it's, again, like you were saying earlier, well, you can't do that because you're a girl. And so it's not the same direct rejection. And so actually, when we're asking women to ask those direct questions around, I would like a pay rise, can I have one? Or please go and buy this thing because it's really going to benefit you, and I know that you should absolutely spend your money on it. It seems that we're more worried about that direct rejection and somebody saying no, because we associate that with our personal worth.
Yeah, I think it very much ties into identity. So, as young boys, boys are encouraged to go out and effectively conquer the world, and women and young girls are effectively, you take a bit of a back seat. And, I think there's so much work happening now around, how children are gendered at a very early age. So I think, there's so much that kind of falls into this, but you're absolutely right in the sense of, especially when I'm doing coaching and we're kind of getting into the deeper levels around people's beliefs and people's core beliefs, some of the things that come up very much focus on things that often as women we're not even aware of, but it's so inculcated into who we think of ourselves as and how society perceives us that it almost becomes something about our identity as women. So when you talk about direct rejection, I remember when I was little and, I used to hear, no, you can't do that because you're a girl. It was like, well, I can't change the fact that I'm a girl, but you're inherently telling me that to be a girl is to be less than. And so when someone gives you, direct feedback or something that's effectively goes to the core of you, to the extent that you can't change who you are, you're a girl, you're a female, it's like, well, how do I navigate this world? And I think that's been interesting for me in the coaching when I've spoken to women, especially I think in the business sense, because I think in the corporate world, there's a lot of unconscious infrastructure elements that really need to be addressed. But I think as you talk about in the business world, I think for a lot of the women, it does come down to, I want to be able to operate my business and I want to be able to ask for the sales and I want to be able to be the leader that I choose to be. I don't want to kind of go into this pseudo masculine aggressive posture in order to be successful, because that's not who I am. But what I keep hearing is that who I am is not good enough and that I can't do this. And so I think it's becoming that women are almost having to, and men are having to expand their view of the world to say, well, actually, maybe men are all of this and women are all of this, and we just get to choose who we are and how we show up. And I think that's a lot of my conversations with women, where I say, you know, it sounds like you know what to do, you have a lot of confidence in what you're offering and the fact that you want to ask for it, but for you the fear is that if I behave this way, I'm going to be perceived in this way and people are going to think less of me. And I think that goes to the core for a lot of people. And so I think there is an element of women holding back because their business is important to them, but their perception and their identity of them as a woman in the rest of their life is just as important. So if I'm in a business and I'm going out and I'm talking to people and there's going to be friends there, I don't want to think, oh my God, my friends must think I'm a really cocky bitch, you know? So I think sometimes all of these things play into it. And that's for me the really fascinating thing in the coaching, because I think once women understand and have an awareness of what's playing into this, now they feel more empowered to say, okay, well, I need to address that and I need to work on this. And I'm actually going to start taking steps that help me to move in the direction that I want to move into.
Well, so, and this is the interesting thing, isn't it? Because that is personality. I mean, you know, you decide that you want to overcome those barriers that are being set on you. And, you know, it's funny, I was reading a quote earlier before we started recording that basically, and I'm going to absolutely balls this up, but that, to paraphrase, you know, said ultimately people change and they transform when they're tired of their own bullshit. You know, that's what happens when they're tired of being told a story that they don't want to believe anymore. And that's what's so interesting about your journey, because that's what you've done. You've listened to what everybody said to you and kind of gone, yeah, no thanks, that's not what I want for me, that's not how I'm going to define myself. And from a really young age, you know, that's a really challenging thing to do, you know, to go against cultural differences, to go against what society is telling you about yourself, and to say, no, there is something different out there for me, there is something better out there, and I don't have to be defined by your rules. That must be actually quite a scary place to be.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, that quote that you said was absolutely fantastic, because while I was traveling, I was kind of ruminating on a lot of the work that I've been doing. And one of the things that I do with women is actually address a lot of their fears that are sometimes really deep down. And, you know, one of the things that I said to somebody recently, I said, you know what, I got to a point where I realized I couldn't outrun my pain. And my pain was that everyone kept telling me who I was meant to be. And yet that persona, that identity just did not fit me. And it was so painful to try and wear that, because I did try. I really, really tried, but I couldn't wear it because it wasn't me. And yet everyone around me told me that that was who I meant to be. And eventually I got to a point where I can't do it. It's so painful to try and be that person. And I realized I can't outrun my pain. But what I came to realize was that my pain gave me the insight to realize, okay, everyone is telling me I'm meant to be this way. I'm going to try this. I don't know if, when you said it could be better, I said, I didn't know it was going to be better. And in so many ways it is better. And I would not change it for the world. And yet even now in my 40s, I still get comments around, well, you don't quite fit in. And I'm like, it's interesting. People's perception of me is their perception of me. And I've reached a point now where, from an external point of view, you know, if you don't like me or if you think whatever about me, in the past, it would have really mattered to me. But now I've kind of got to the point where I've built my sense of self to be what's the most important thing, and, you know, the opinions of the people that I really value. And if someone gives me feedback, I will always listen to it, because I think, if I feel tense when someone gives me feedback, there's a level of truth in it and I need to listen to it. And oftentimes feedback can just be someone's projection anyway. But I think it's a journey that we take because we realize that at some level, you know, I don't want to live that life, or my pain just keeps chasing me and I can't get away with it. So maybe I need to turn around and look at my pain and where is it taking me? Because like you said, at the end of the day, our dream is that it will be better and that we will become who we want to be. And in the process, by demonstrating that level of leadership and that level of courage, that we actually then become a role model. So I have, 4 nieces. I really hope that I am a role model in their eyes, that I've chosen to live a different model than what was prescribed by my culture and my society. And I hope that's given them the freedom to think, maybe there is another way. Maybe I don't have to go down the really well-trod path. Maybe I will take the road less traveled and I'll see where it takes me.
And I think that's incredible. And I've no doubt that you absolutely are an inspiration to them, because I think that, you know, in times gone by, we've looked, I think, too far away for inspiration. You know, I hear this a lot when clients come to me, they say, I don't feel as good about my business because, you know, look at all these people who made 6 figures in 6 months, or 7 figures in 2 months, or 8 figures. And they're looking at these goals and they're seeming so unattainable and so far away. And we look, you know, I do all the time. I look at Sarah Blakely from Spanx. I love her. I think she's great. You know, if you don't follow her on Instagram, everybody, you are missing out. She's hilarious. But equally, you know, there've definitely been times where I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't understand why I'm not like Sarah Blakely. It doesn't matter how inspirational I find her. You know, I'm like, she's like 5'10", she's blonde, she's really attractive, she makes great pants, you know, she has an amazing business and husband, and the woman can make pancakes into like the shapes of horses and knights and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, I'm literally sat here trying to microwave meals. Like, what is going on? You know, and so sometimes we look so far away for that inspiration that actually it then feels like it's not possible. And I think, you know, that's interesting.
It's really interesting. And I remember I was in Ireland once, and my sister was driving me to the airport, and we were talking about, and my sister was saying exactly the same thing, that she follows various people and all of this stuff. And I kind of said to her, I said, you know, one thing I've realized is that none of us are teaching anything new. We're effectively teaching timeless principles, but we all teach it in our own way. I said, the bottom line is that no one is ever going to ever be able to be you the way you will be. I said, you are absolutely unique. I said, in the history of humanity, civilization, etc., there has never been anyone like you. And so what you see through your eyeballs is what you're sharing, and you're unique. I was like, no one is ever going to be able to be you. I said, so, you know, as much as we can admire and be inspired by people around us, you know, I think Oscar Wilde was the one who said it, is, you know, everyone else is taken, you can only be you. I said, so we have to almost kind of, I personally believe that I think when our focus is too external, what happens is we start negating ourselves because we're comparing ourselves to these people who are absolutely amazing. But you know what? They're doing a fantastic job being who they are, and they're probably making the best of their assets and their strengths. And I think that's the only thing that we can do. So one thing that I always say to my clients is, you know, if you can focus on yourself and be the absolute best that you can be, and the only person who can tell you whether that's true or not is you, then the focus is on who you're being, what you're doing. And whilst we can always get inspiration from external people, you know, I think the inspiration has to be that they inspire me, and yet I'm inspired to be who I really am. Because I think that it's a really key thing, because I've heard so many people say, oh, but so-and-so, and I'm like, they're doing a great job being themselves. Why are you trying to be them? Because you're not them.
And that's so interesting. That's something we see so much in the business world, you know, and I talk about it as being cookie cutter, because I would say that I'm a fairly cynical person at this point. But we call it, you know, we call it cookie cutter. We recognize that people take and repurpose content to a degree that we're perhaps not happy about. We recognize that, you know, if we go and do something that we see as being game changing, that somebody else is going to do it 5 or 10 minutes later. And, you know, it's one of those things that we don't seem to realize when somebody else does it to us, that it is exactly what you've just said. It's that moment of inspiration for somebody else who is trying to be you instead of trying to be themselves, you know. And it frustrates us from a legal perspective, of course, because nobody wants to have to send out cease and desists, but it's that kind of moment where, you know, I could choose to give up this business tomorrow and go and make elasticated trousers. It's not going to work out for me. I'm not ever going to be able to make that happen. And I think, you know, you're so right about people having to choose what the best version of themselves looks like. And ultimately, you know, it doesn't matter about the business strategy you're thinking about. It's about putting that best self into it, you know, and really using your own skills, your own USP, your own talents, and that best version of you to ultimately go ahead and achieve the levels of success that you're looking for.
Well, how much energy would you expend in effectively comparing yourself to someone else and then trying to be them, when that energy could be focused on you and how you want to show up in the world and how you want to be a leader and how you're going to take, you know, the timeless things that you're doing that everyone else is doing, but showing up in your vein, because you're the only one that's going to be able to do that. And I think when we focus on ourselves and being as real as we are, you know, warts and all, I think that's, you know, that's the things that people are inspired by, because it's like, wow, that person's really being true to who they are. And it comes through, you know, I think it's a very energetic, unconscious thing that when you see people who are really being true to themselves, even if it's not your cup of tea, you're like, wow, that's really cool. And then you can tell the people that are trying to kind of almost copy other people, and you think, you know, I think they're really good, but there's something not quite right there. So you know, for me, it's something that in the corporate world, and I think when I work with people who are in their own business, I said, you know, focus on what you can do really, really well, because otherwise your energy is getting expended into something that is really not going to serve you, because you're going to get to the end of that line and you're going to be like, you know what, this is not really me. And I was like, would you really want to get down that avenue, you know, in a year's time and think, Christ, I could have spent the last year actually focusing on me and how I want to show up and the leader I want to be, and how I want to be asking for the things that I want to ask for. And the other thing that I've really, in my own career, I've noticed is, you know, success is different for all of us. Like in the past, I used to be like, oh, I want to have a big house, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm like, actually, I just want like a really nice little cottage in the Scottish Highlands, I think. Maybe a dog, maybe a car. I probably will need a car if I'm living in the countryside. But, you know, it was like, oh, my definition of success has really altered, because so one person I found really inspiring is Tom Shadyac, who went through an incredibly transformative journey. I mean, this is the guy that was the director of all of the Jim Carrey movies, and that changed my life, because I went from, wow, you know, he's really inspired me, and actually he made me look at what I was valuing and what success meant to me. And I thought, wow, I wanted the big stuff because I thought it would look good, but actually I don't think it's going to make me happy. I actually like a simple, relatively obscure life. So it really made me look at what success is. So I kind of think, you know, if you want the big stuff and that really gets you going and it makes you so happy, go for it. But make sure you're going for it because that's what you really want, and not because the world tells you that that's what success looks like. Because I've met a lot of people who probably wouldn't be classed as successful, and yet they are the happiest, most contented, inspiring leaders I've ever met and worked with.
And I really love that point. I think it's one of those things. So I'm about to be 30 this year. Woohoo. And
you're a baby.
I know. I can't wait for my 40s actually, because apparently this is when you give zero fucks. Like when you're 40,
yes,
apparently that's just what happens.
I'm 45 and I would definitely say I'm in that space.
Yeah. See that this is the thing. I can't wait. I'm like, screw the 30. Like, let's just go straight for the big 4-0. But it's one of those things, you know, I'm about to be 30. You know, I've been in a relationship with my partner for quite a few years. And the constant refrain is, when are you going to get married? We went to a wedding a few weeks ago and everyone was like, when are you going to get married? When's it you? And you're like, we're not even engaged. Or when are you going to have kids? When are you going to do this? And we look at our life and we are, you know, relatively selfish people. And we don't want those things. You know, we don't want children, and we've got a dog and that's quite enough for us. And again, this is something I've said on the podcast many times, you know, that's our life choice. But the interesting thing is, so we went to this wedding and obviously we always know everyone's going to ask, oh, it'll be you too.
Yeah, of course.
You know, you kind of have like a game plan for it, don't you? And so we went to this wedding, and actually the vicar who was marrying our two friends, who we absolutely adore, went rogue like during the ceremony. And he basically was like, he said, don't even understand what people who aren't getting married are doing. You know, girlfriend, what even is that? Partner, don't get me started, kind of thing. And apparently my face during the ceremony was just like, what the actual crap is going on? And you know, and so people were saying to me afterwards, oh my goodness, are you upset that you're not getting married? And I was like, no, but I'm upset that is okay, that is okay to say to people who are all in the room to celebrate something that is amazing and that is lovely, that actually if you're not doing that, you are less than. And it's a trap that I definitely get caught up in. And you know, I'm always saying to my partner, I'm like, oh god, I'm really sorry, you know, I'm sat here scrolling through Facebook and there's been 10 proposals this week because it's Christmas. You know, and you have that conversation and you don't necessarily want those things, but you do really get caught up quite easily and pretty quickly into, should I have that? And I think that when people go into the business world, you know, it becomes really prevalent. People are like, oh, well, I should have a 6-figure business and I should have, you know, a business that's location independent. I should be working from the beach every day. And like, you know, well, not really. It's very impractical to work from the beach every day.
It's ridiculous. You get sand everywhere.
Exactly. In places that you do not need sand, keyboards are not a
Exactly.
good thing. You know, we get so caught up in it. And I think it is really hard, especially when that's what you're being exposed to on a day-to-day basis, to actually decide what you want from it. What do you want? Because I know that if 10 people sit there and bang on at me about marriage and kids for, you know, an hour, I will walk away and feel like I'm failing, like I should be considering different options, like, you know, something else, no matter how I, you know, feel about it afterwards and think, what a pillock, you know, that's not how I will walk away inevitably feeling. So when we're putting people into these business decisions and they're on social media and they're, you know, consuming all of this information, how can we like put our barriers up? How can we have that, I don't know, Star Wars shield up moment where we acknowledge what other people are doing and we accept what they're doing for them, but we internally process it, I don't know, quicker or more resiliently so that we can move past it and actually focus on what we're supposed to be doing for us?
There's two things that I would recommend, and I think it's such an important thing. So I know for myself, and you know, to your point, you're in your 30s. I probably got into this space when I was in my 40s, because I think there's an element of life experience that gets you to the point where if you are aware of what is triggering you, then you can look at it and you can address it and you can make choices around it. And I think it's interesting when I talk to my niece, my eldest niece, who's 21, you know, I have conversations with her and I say, you know, when something comes up for you, have a look at it. I said, even when it's really painful, I said, look at it. I said, because Neil Donald Walsh said beautifully, what you resist persists, what you look at disappears. So when you look at the things that trigger you, and I can totally relate to what you're saying. So I'm from an Indian background. I'm not married. I don't have children. I'm in my 40s. And the likelihood is I'm probably not going to have children. I would love to get married if I met the right person. But I'll be honest with you, I've kind of made my peace with that, because I think I have an amazing life. I absolutely love my life. And, you know, I'm really happy. And I've got to the point now where when people talk to me about things that aren't in my life, I listen to them and I thank them for their input, and then I go and live my life. So I don't really engage with them in the sense of being, yes, no, you're right, I should be married or whatever, because I've reached that point where my sense of self is so solid and grounded within its perception of itself that if other people have an opinion on it, that's fine. They're welcome. I'm happy for them to have an opinion, but it doesn't mean that their opinion matters to me in the sense that I'm going to do anything about it. Someone said something that really resonated. I'd be like, oh yeah, that's a good point. I might think about that. And then I'll make a choice about it. But I choose to almost, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a shield or anything like that, but there's almost a level of filter where I don't allow things to automatically come into me. They kind of come and I kind of look at them and I think, yeah, I like you. I'll take you in. No, I don't agree. It's not my thing. Goodbye. Thank you very much for your input. Goodbye. And that's taken a level of, I think, really kind of focusing and honing your sense of awareness and your consciousness, because ultimately, you know, when you're in that space where people are talking at you about all these things and you go away feeling bad, it's because it's like, there's no filter. Everything, you know, that energy has come into you. You've absorbed it and now you're feeling it. And I know that for a long time, I probably was in a space where I was very disconnected, where I wouldn't even let that come to me because it was just so painful. But now I thought, no, I want to be connected, but I don't want to be so connected that everything comes into me. So now I choose to be connected and detached at the same time. So connected in the sense of I want to build relationships. I want to have people in my life who agree with me, and I want to have people in my life who disagree with me, because I learn a lot from the people that probably will share opinions. I'm like, whoa, not at all. But it makes me look at everything. So I don't throw things away or I don't let them all come in. I kind of look at it and I think, how do I feel about this? What's my view on this? If it works for me, if it serves me, I will take it in. If it doesn't work for me, it doesn't serve me, I thank it and I wish it on its merry way. But like I said, I think it takes a level of awareness and consciousness and working through that over a number of, for me, it's been over a number of years, to the point now where when I was traveling through Canada and Alaska recently, I was on my own. I was part of a tour group. And I actually, as much as I love being with the people that were on the tour, I spent a lot of time on my own. And I had so many people say, oh my God, you're so brave. And I'm thinking, I want to live the life that I want to live. And I'm unconcerned with what people's thoughts are about it. Because if I'm happy and the people that matter to me are happy, and sometimes they're not, but as long as I'm happy, I actually know that my influence on the world is much stronger than if I am disturbed, worried, tense about who I'm being. So for me, the focus is, and for a lot of my clients, I say, we have to, in this incredibly multifaceted, dimensional world, we have to figure out what our place in the world is. And we have to occupy that to the extent that no matter what the external focus and no matter what the external forces are coming at us, we find our space and we solidify that and we stay connected, but we're not buffeted by it all the time, that we're kind of going from one place to the other and like, oh, do I believe that? Oh, I don't know. Maybe I should go after that. Oh, I don't know. And it just becomes really exhausting.
And I really love that. I think it's so interesting, isn't it? How we are controlled, well, not controlled, but I can't remember who it was. Is it? No, I'm going to completely murder. But somebody famous, and I want to say somebody like Bruce Lee, but I don't think it was. So when you go away and Google this later, guys, accept that, I love quotes, but I can never remember who they're from. And this is why
me too.
Motivational quotes do not make businesses, because I can never remember who you are when you say it. But there is somebody who effectively said, if you make all of your decisions via emotion, you are controlled by what other people say about you. You're controlled by other people's words. If you make your decisions for yourself, you have that filter and you're able to make your decisions through logic, which means that you're not effectively the rag doll in the dog's mouth. You have the choice for yourself.
I think you're right. But I think for me, I was for a long time incredibly rational and logical. And I think it created a level of disconnection. I think for me, it's a mixture between emotion and logic, because I think emotion allows you to stay connected. So if someone's talking to you and they're incredibly emotional, I think the ability to translate that emotion into what that means for you is really important. But I think you're right in the sense of you want to be able to stay connected, be able to translate that, figure out what that means for you, and then actually put a rational filter over it to say, okay, so I'm not going to just run away with that because it makes me feel a particular way. I want to make sure that actually my feelings are based in a sense of groundedness, not only in what I believe, but also what I want to believe going forward. So if someone gives me feedback about something they've noticed in me, I might be like, wow, no one's ever given me that feedback, but I'm really curious about it, and I'll explore it at an emotional level, at a logical level, at a spiritual level, and then I'll come to my own conclusion. And then I might go and talk to that person again and have a discussion about it. But I try and look at it from the perspective of, at the end of the day, I make a choice about what comes into my world and what I allow to stay and what I say goodbye to, because I know, and I've seen it, and so many people have shared with me that, someone tells you something and, it really hurts you. And I said, what we need to do in that situation is look at why it hurts us. So what is the identity or perception that we have about ourselves that has been hurt by whatever somebody said? I said, it may be completely untrue, in which case you can say, thank you for your feedback. It doesn't resonate with me and I'm not going to take any notice of it. Or you might be, wow, actually, there are times where I can show up in that way. And now you have a choice as to whether you continue that pattern or whether you choose to be different. And I think that's the key, is that we can't shut the world out. You could become a hermit, but you're not going to be able to run a very successful business, even if you are just online and sitting in the Highlands somewhere. The reality is you're still going to need to be connecting with people. So the world is going to come in whichever way you look at it. And it just becomes, how do I navigate this really beautiful world that can be incredibly challenging and painful and succeed on my own terms so that I'm contented and happy and fulfilled. And as a leader, people get that from me. So they get that actually it's not about trying to build this empire. It's about just wanting to help people or wanting to serve or wanting to be a fantastic writer or whatever it might be. But that level of kind of truth and authenticity then resonates in you as a leader. And then people are drawn to you from a really strong point. It's not a kind of, they're not just in there because they like one bit of you and then they can't stand the rest of you kind of thing.
It's always the way though, isn't it? You're like, I think people, especially in the business world, I think, there is that temptation to try and be perfect, all the things to everyone that everyone wants you to be. And actually that just puts so much pressure on you and what you're trying to achieve that you end up almost going the opposite way. Maybe that for some people, maybe that takes time. For me, I think it all blows up quite quickly because I'm just like,
and the truth is we are perfect in our imperfection because we love it. We love shouting for the underdog and everything. And one of the things that I've come to realize, and I definitely was an absolute victim to the whole perfection notion. And I've come to realize I am perfect in my perfection and imperfection. There's no such thing as this notion of perfect anyway. Perfection is who you are in the best of you and probably the worst of you as well, because that's what makes you human. I mean, at the end of the day, we are human and we are kind of, dark and light. We are all of it. And so if we keep pushing part of it away, it just gets bigger at an unconscious level and eventually shows up and you can't ignore it. So I think, we almost have to really determine for ourselves, who am I going to be and how can I be that person to the best of my ability, and trust in that. Because I think if you can trust in yourself, I think your business tends to be a reflection of the trust that you have in yourself and in your mission and your vision and what you're trying to do. Because otherwise, like you say, you're just kind of being pulled in many different directions and you're never really finding your true north and why you're in business in the first place.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on today. Seriously, this has been so interesting. I could talk to you all day long.
That's always the case.
Yeah, no, honestly, I'm like, just wipe my diary. But it's so interesting, and it's so much more than just questions of how do you be a good leader? How do we, assess the income gap between, the genders and things like that. Thank you so much for all of this. Where can people find you? If people are thinking, right, how can I start these conversations with myself or on a bigger scale in my business, in my company, where's the best place for them to find you?
So they can find me at my website, which is www.highvaluewoman.org. So High Value Woman is all one word. And I also have a book called 6 Steps to Six Figures, which is available on Amazon, which is effectively about helping women and men kind of, release their fears around asking for what they want, own their worth in a way that's really grounded in themselves, and then put together that proposal or whatever it is and ask for what they want. So yes, those are probably the two main avenues.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on today. This has been amazing. Guys, if you have found this episode as interesting as I have, which I hope you will, because it is just epic, it might actually be one of the very, very few that I go back and re-listen to because I hate the sound of my own voice.
Me too.
I may go back and listen to this one because it does have so many gems in there. If you've enjoyed it as much as I have, please make sure that you head over to highvaluewoman.org or that you go over onto Amazon and grab a copy of Sabiha's book, because it's one of those things that, running your own business really isn't about heading in the direction that everybody expects you to or wants you to. It's about making the best decisions for you and setting your own strategy to make that happen. I will see you in Monday's episode with some insights on how the current climate is treating us when it comes to sales. So I will see you in Monday's episode.